My name is Minerva. I'm 25 years old. The entire table went silent. My mother had just made a joke at my expense, and in that moment, in front of everyone, I had a choice. I could react and play my part in the usual family drama, or I could stay quiet. I chose silence. And that silence was the loudest thing I've ever said. It was the beginning of the end of my silent suffering and the start of me finally taking my life back. The air, thick with the smell of roast chicken and my grandmother's perfume, suddenly felt thin, impossible to breathe. Every eye was on me. My uncle froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. My cousins shot nervous glances across the table. My father just stared at his plate like the pattern on the china held all the secrets of the universe. In that one moment, a lifetime of similar moments flashed before my eyes. Every casual dismissal, every cutting remark disguised as a laugh, every single time I had swallowed my hurt just to keep the peace. But this time was different. This time, my silence wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a presence. It was a shield. It was a decision. Let me back up for a minute, because when you're talking about family betrayal, context is everything. To anyone on the outside, we looked like the perfect family. We lived in a nice house in a great neighborhood. My dad was a respected professional, and my mom was a pillar of the community, famous for her charm, her effortless parties, and her seemingly perfect family. We took vacations every year, we had family game nights, and our Christmas cards were masterpieces of curated joy. But behind closed doors, and sometimes right out in the open, things were a lot more complicated. Our home was governed by a set of unwritten rules, and the most important rule of all was to maintain the perfect facade, no matter the cost. My mother was the sun our little family solar system revolved around. She was charismatic, beautiful, and magnetic. When she was happy, the whole house was full of light and laughter. She could make you feel like the most important person on earth. But her moods were a total minefield, and when that light switched off, a chilling cold would just descend on all of us. Her approval was the currency in our house, and we all competed for it, desperate for a little bit of her warmth. My father, a quiet and non-confrontational man, learned early on that the path of least resistance was just to agree with her, to soothe her, to enable her. He wasn't cruel, he was a professional conflict avoider. I've learned since then that this kind of dynamic is common in families that choose superficial peace over real connection, and it almost always leads to resentment and alienation. My older brother, on the other hand, was the golden child. He could do no wrong. His wins were magnified, his flaws totally ignored. He was the living, breathing poster child for our family's success story. And then there was me. I was the peacekeeper, the good daughter, the easy one. From a super young age, I learned that my job was to be low maintenance, to guess what everyone needed, and to soak up any tension in the room. I got my PhD in reading micro-expressions, in sensing that subtle shift in the air that meant my mother's disapproval was coming. If she was mad at my dad, I'd make her tea. If my brother was stressed, I'd quietly do his chores. I was the family's emotional shock absorber. I didn't have the words for it then, but I was playing a classic role in a dysfunctional family system. I was the scapegoat, but not in the rebellious way you might think. My role wasn't to act out. It was to take on all the family's unspoken anxieties. Whenever a real issue came up, money worries, a fight between my parents, my brother's struggles, the focus would somehow, magically, shift to me. And my mother's primary tool for this? Her humor. She had a razor-sharp wit, and it was usually pointed at me. If I was proud of a grade, she'd say in front of everyone, "Well, look at you, finally catching up to your brother, huh?" If I was excited about a new friend, she'd ask, "Are you sure they like you? You can be a bit much sometimes." Each comment came with a brilliant smile and a light laugh, a signal to everyone that it was just a joke. And because I was the easy one, the good sport, I was expected to laugh along. If I didn't, if I showed even a hint of being hurt, I'd be accused of the ultimate sin in our family, being too sensitive. This emotional bullying, dressed up as teasing, worked like a charm. It taught me that my feelings were wrong, an inconvenience. So I learned to just bury them. I'd feel the sting, that hot rush of shame, but I'd force a smile and say, "Oh, Mom," like it was all in good fun. It was a survival tactic. In a house where speaking up could cause a huge fight, or even worse, the silent treatment, staying quiet felt like the only way to stay safe. Every time I did this, every time I buried my own hurt to make her happy, I was just reinforcing my role. I was proving I was the easy one. But what I was really doing was building an invisible wall around my own heart, brick by brick, made of resentment, confusion, and a deep, gnawing loneliness. But everything changed that night. It was my dad's 60th birthday, a big one that called for a grand celebration. My mom had been planning it for months. The dining table was stretched to its max, set with the best china that only came out twice a year. The room was buzzing with the loud energy of aunts, uncles, cousins, and close family friends. And for once, I wasn't feeling that usual anxiety that came with these get-togethers. I was actually feeling good. I had just been accepted into a graduate program I had worked my tail off for. It was the first thing in forever that felt completely mine. Something I'd done all on my own, away from my family's expectations. I hadn't told anyone yet. I was waiting for the right moment, naively hoping I could share my news in this happy atmosphere, and that, just this once, it would be met with simple, uncomplicated pride. The main course was cleared, and dessert was served. The chatter lulled a bit as everyone dug into my mom's famous chocolate cake. My father, beaming at the head of the table, was telling a story about his first job. It felt like the perfect opening. "Actually, speaking of new chapters," I started, my voice a little louder than I meant it to be. The room quieted, and a few heads turned my way. I felt a flutter of nerves, but pushed on. "I have some pretty exciting news. I got an email this week. I've been accepted into the master's program for social work at the State University." A few polite claps went around the table. My aunt smiled warmly. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful. Congratulations." My cousin gave me a thumbs up. I looked over at my parents, my heart full of hope. My dad was smiling, a real, proud smile. He started to say, "That's my girl." But my mother cut him off. She put her fork down with a delicate clink, a theatrical move that pulled all the remaining attention to her. She had that little, knowing smile on her face, the one that always came before a performance. "Social work?" she said, her voice dripping with fake thoughtfulness. She looked around the table, making eye contact with a few people, pulling them into her act. "Well, I guess that makes sense." She paused for effect. "You've certainly had enough practice dealing with dysfunctional people living in this family." She delivered the line with a practiced, airy laugh and took a dainty bite of her cake. A couple of people chuckled uncomfortably. My uncle let out a forced "ha." But the big wave of laughter she was expecting never came. Instead, a strange, heavy silence fell over the room. The joke was too real, too close to the bone. It wasn't just a shot at me. It was a comment on everyone there. An admission of the very dysfunction we were all pretending didn't exist. And in that moment, as every eye in the room flickered to me, waiting for my reaction, time just slowed down. I felt that familiar, hot wave of shame wash over me, a prickly heat that started in my chest and spread to my cheeks. The lump in my throat was so big, I felt like I was choking. My mind was a mess of conflicting thoughts. Say something. Don't let her get away with that. You're a 25-year-old woman, not a child. Tell her that wasn't funny. No, don't. You'll ruin Dad's birthday. Everyone will stare. She'll twist it and say you're being dramatic. She'll say, "See, this is what I have to deal with. It will only get worse." Just laugh. Laugh it off like you always do. It's easier. Just pretend it didn't hurt. Make them comfortable again. But I'm so tired of making them comfortable. I'm so tired of pretending. My hands were balled into fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms. I could feel my own frantic heartbeat in my ears. I looked at my mother. She was watching me, that little smile still on her lips, her eyes challenging me. It was a power play. She was publicly trashing my achievement and my feelings, reinforcing the unwritten rule that her comfort was more important than my self-respect. And everyone at that table was a silent witness. I took a breath. And I did. Nothing. I didn't laugh. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I didn't defend myself. I just held her gaze for a second, my face a total blank. Then I picked up my water glass, took a slow, deliberate sip, and set it back down. I didn't say a single word. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the stunned silence from before. This was my silence. It was a vacuum, and it was sucking all the air out of her performance. By refusing to play my part, either as the good-natured victim who laughs along or the oversensitive daughter who makes a scene, I had broken the script. The room stayed quiet for what felt like an eternity. Finally, my aunt, a kind soul, cleared her throat and asked my cousin about his new car, desperately trying to fill the awkward void. The conversation slowly, painfully, sputtered back to life, but you could feel the festive energy was just gone. It was replaced by a thick, lingering tension. I spent the rest of the dinner in that silence, a quiet observer at a party I no longer felt a part of. The drive home was suffocatingly quiet. My dad kept his eyes glued to the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel. My mom hummed along to the radio, a cheerful, defiant tune that felt like a slap in the face. Neither of them said a word about what happened. That was our family's way. Sweep it under the rug. Avoidance was our main coping mechanism, a strategy that just eats away at trust over time. I sat in the back, staring at the blurry streetlights, feeling completely invisible. When I finally got back to my own little apartment, the mask I'd worn at the dinner table completely shattered. The delayed emotional reaction hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just sadness. It was a tsunami of grief, anger, and a bone-deep exhaustion that settled into my very marrow. I collapsed on my couch and just sobbed. I cried for the little girl who learned her feelings were a burden. I cried for the teenager who smiled through cutting remarks to avoid making waves. I cried for the young woman who just had a moment of pure pride stolen from her in front of everyone she knew. I was mourning a lifetime of tiny paper cuts that had finally left me bleeding out. As I sat there among the damp tissues, a profound emptiness followed the storm of tears. It was the feeling of hitting rock bottom. I had spent my whole life twisting myself into pretzels to fit the role my family gave me. And for what? To be publicly humiliated for a moment of personal victory? To live in a constant state of anxiety, always waiting for the next joke? That's when it hit me. My silence at the dinner table wasn't me giving up. It was me refusing to play. For the first time, I had refused to manage my mother's emotions or the table's discomfort. In that quiet act of defiance, I had chosen myself. And if I could choose silence, I could choose other things too. I could choose not to answer the phone. I could choose to leave a room. I could choose what parts of myself I shared. It was a terrifying and thrilling realization. The power I thought my mother held over me was power I had handed to her, over and over again. That night was my turning point. I made a quiet vow to myself. I would no longer set myself on fire to keep my family warm. I was done. I was done being the easy one. I was done laughing at jokes that weren't funny. I was done putting their comfort before my own sanity. The next day, I didn't rush out to buy a self-help book. Instead, I went online and started researching. I typed in things like, why does my mom make jokes that hurt? Feeling responsible for parents' emotions, and how to deal with a critical parent. A word kept popping up again and again. Boundaries. I had always thought of boundaries as something harsh, like building a wall to keep people out. But the more I read, the more I understood. Boundaries weren't about punishing other people. They were about protecting myself. They were a way of teaching people how to treat me. I read something from a therapist that just clicked: boundaries aren't selfish. They are essential for preventing burnout and resentment. It felt like someone had handed me a user manual for my own life that my family had conveniently forgotten to include. The path forward wasn't about changing my mother, it was about changing my own behavior. And it was going to be the hardest thing I had ever done. Before I tell you what happened next, and how I started to build these boundaries brick by painful brick, I want to ask you something. Leave a comment below if you've ever been called too sensitive or dramatic for having a completely valid emotional reaction. Let's show each other that we're not alone in this. And if this story is resonating with you, consider subscribing. We're building a community here of people learning to reclaim their stories. The first test came sooner than I expected. 2 days after the birthday dinner from hell, my phone rang. Mom flashed on the screen. My whole body tensed. The old me would have answered right away, ready to pretend nothing happened and fall back into the same old pattern. The new me just stared at the phone, heart pounding. I took a deep breath, remembered my vow, and let it ring. A few minutes later, a text. Call me. I waited an hour. It was a small thing, but it felt huge. It was the first time I hadn't jumped to respond to her. When I finally called back, I had a plan. Our calls were usually me, listening for an hour while she complained about her friends, my dad, or some minor drama, with me just providing endless validation. This time, when she answered, I said, "Hi, Mom, I saw you called. I'm just about to head out, so I only have about 10 minutes. The silence on the other end was telling. 10 minutes? She asked, her voice laced with confusion. Oh, okay, well, I was just calling to see why you were so quiet at your father's party. Are you all right? There it was. The invitation to apologize, to explain, to get sucked back into the cycle. I could feel the pull, a lifetime of conditioning urging me to jade, to justify, argue, defend, or explain. The old me would have launched into a tearful explanation of how her comment hurt me, which she would have then picked apart, denied, and turned back on me. The new me tried a different approach. I'm fine, Mom. Just a lot on my mind with the new master's program, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I was stating a fact, not giving her an emotional opening. It was my first attempt at a boundary, basically telling her she didn't get free access to my emotions anymore. Well, you just seem so sullen. Your father was worried, she pushed. I'm glad you all had a good time celebrating Dad's birthday, I replied, deliberately redirecting the conversation. Anyway, my 10 minutes are almost up. I have to run. I'll talk to you later in the week. And before she could protest, I said, bye, and hung up. I put the phone down, my hand shaking. I felt a crazy mix of terror and triumph. But more than anything, I felt a tidal wave of guilt. A voice in my head that sounded a lot like hers was screaming at me. You're a bad daughter. She was just worried. You're being cold and cruel, after everything she's done for you. I've since learned that this guilt is a common reaction when you first set boundaries. I had to literally sit down and talk myself through it. I had to become my own parent in that moment, giving myself the validation I never got as a kid. I told myself, you are not cruel. You are clear. You are not responsible for her feelings. You are allowed to protect your own time and energy. The next brick in my wall was a topic boundary. A week later, on our next scheduled by me 10-minute call, she tried another tactic. After a few minutes of small talk, she said, you know, your cousin Sarah is also thinking about grad school. But for business, of course. Something that will actually lead to a good job. There it was. Another joke. A subtle jab at my career choice. The sting was immediate and familiar. But this time, instead of swallowing it, I was ready. Mom, I said, my voice calm but firm. That topic doesn't work for me. Again, a beat of stunned silence. What topic? I was just telling you about Sarah. My career choice is not up for discussion or jokes, I clarified. I'm not going to talk about it with you if the comments are going to be negative. Oh, for heaven's sake, she huffed. I cannot believe how sensitive you've become. I was just making an observation. You can't take a single joke anymore. What is wrong with you lately? This was the pushback I expected. The anger, the blame shifting, the "you're too sensitive" accusation. It's a classic tactic to make you doubt yourself. But because I had read about this, because I knew this was part of the script, I didn't take the bait. There's nothing wrong with me, I said, my voice still even. But like I said, I'm not discussing this. We have 2 minutes left. Did you want to talk about something else? She was furious. She muttered something about me being impossible, and then abruptly said she had to go. When I hung up that time, the guilt was still there, but it was quieter. It was overshadowed by a flicker of pride. I had done it again. I had held the line. These first attempts were clumsy and terrifying. But with boundaries, consistency is everything. Each time I held a boundary, it got a little easier. I started limiting my visits home. I stopped going to every single family event. When my mom would try to guilt trip me, "We never see you anymore," I'd respond calmly, "I know, life's been busy. I'll let you know when I have a free weekend." I was learning to detach with love. It was lonely. My brother called and told me I was upsetting Mom. My dad texted, "Please just try to get along." I later learned a term for this: flying monkeys. People sent by a narcissist to pull you back into the dysfunctional system. They weren't being evil, they just wanted the tension I was creating to go away. For a while, I felt like an island, but the peace and quiet on that island were starting to feel a whole lot better than the stormy seas of my family's drama. For months, I kept up this new, low-contact relationship. It was a fragile peace, built on short phone calls and polite, distant interactions. I knew the real test was still coming, and it arrived as an invitation to my brother's engagement party. This was an event I couldn't skip. Not going would have created a family war I wasn't ready for. The weeks leading up to it were filled with that old, familiar dread. My mother called a few days before the party, her voice sickly sweet. "I'm so excited to see you on Saturday," she said. "I just hope you're not going to be in one of your moods. It's a happy occasion, and we all need to be on our best behavior." The condescension, the preemptive strike suggesting I would be the problem, was infuriating. In the past, that comment would have crushed me. Now, it was a signal. This was my moment. The climax of my quiet revolution wasn't going to be a shouting match. It was going to be a calm, direct statement of fact. I took a deep breath, picturing the wall I'd been building. "Mom, I'm looking forward to celebrating with everyone," I started, my voice steady. "But before Saturday, I need to say something that's important for our relationship." There was a pause. She was not expecting that. "I need you to know," I continued, "that the way you've been speaking to me is no longer acceptable. The jokes at my expense, like at Dad's birthday, are hurtful, and I won't tolerate them anymore. I'm telling you this now, so we're clear. I will be at the party to celebrate my brother. But if you make a comment like that again, publicly or privately, I will get up and I will leave. I'm not saying this to be difficult. I'm saying it because I want a relationship with you, but I can't have one that involves me being disrespected." The silence on the other end was absolute. For a second, I thought she'd hung up. Then, I heard a sharp gasp. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "How dare you speak to me like that? After everything I have done for you?" I was joking. "It is not my fault you are so ridiculously sensitive. The disrespect, the absolute ingratitude." It was the explosion I had always been afraid of. The full-force rage, the victim playing, the denial. She threw every weapon in her arsenal at me. But something amazing happened. I wasn't afraid. I had prepared for this. I knew her issues were not my fault. I listened calmly until she paused for breath. Then I said, "I'm sorry you feel that way. But what I said is not up for negotiation. It's a boundary. I've said what I needed to say, and I'm not going to argue about it. I hope you can respect that." "Respect it? You're threatening me," she shrieked. "No," I said, my voice softening just a bit. "I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. I'll see you on Saturday." And with that, I hung up. A profound sense of calm washed over me. I had faced the dragon and survived. I had spoken my truth without yelling, crying, or justifying myself. I had simply stated the terms of my own engagement. The power dynamic had shifted for good. The party was no longer a place where I would be a victim. It was a place where I would be an adult who had her own back. Walking into that engagement party felt like walking onto a stage. I could feel my mother watching my every move. She was cordial, but her smile was brittle. She avoided being alone with me. Throughout the night, I could feel her testing the waters. While talking in a group that included me, she started to tell a story about my clumsy childhood. It was headed straight toward another joke. As she began, "I'll never forget the time she tried to..." I simply turned to my cousin beside me and said, "Have you tried the bacon-wrapped scallops? They're amazing." And I physically moved a few feet away, pulling him into a new conversation. I didn't make a scene. I just calmly removed myself from the line of fire. It was a subtle, powerful enforcement of my boundary. My mother's story faltered. She quickly changed the subject. She knew I meant business. The fallout wasn't some big drama, but a gradual shift. My relationship with my mother entered a new phase. It's more distant, for sure. The old, enmeshed intimacy, which was really just me acting as her emotional support animal, is gone. It's been replaced by something more cautious and formal, but also more honest. We talk about superficial things now: the weather, a TV show, her garden. We don't talk about our feelings or my career. I've accepted she may never change or be the mom I once desperately craved. And that's okay, because I have changed. The transformation in my own life has been incredible. That constant, low-grade anxiety that used to be my life's background music has faded. I sleep better. I trust my own judgment. I'm living proof of what all the research says. Setting healthy boundaries can massively reduce stress and boost your mental well-being. I no longer walk on eggshells. I walk on solid ground that I built myself. And the most surprising part? My other relationships have improved. By learning to state my needs respectfully, my friendships have gotten deeper. My relationship with my dad has even started to shift. Seeing my strength has, in a small way, encouraged him to find his own, and we've started having more honest conversations, just the two of us. This whole journey started with a moment of public humiliation and a quiet promise to myself. It was a promise to stop betraying myself for the approval of others. It was a decision to be the hero of my own story, instead of a side character in someone else's drama. The silence I chose that night at the dinner table wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of finding my real voice. That night, my silence was a promise to myself. A promise that I was done being the punchline. The journey from that silent dinner table to where I am now wasn't easy. It was filled with guilt, fear, and so much doubt. But on the other side of that fear is peace. It's the peace that comes from knowing your worth isn't decided by someone else's approval or their laughter. It's the quiet confidence you get from knowing you can and will protect yourself. If you are in that silent place right now, feeling trapped by family expectations or hurt by their words, know this: your silence doesn't have to be surrender. It can be the quiet moment you take to gather your strength before you start to build. It can be the pause where you finally decide to choose yourself. You get to decide what your story is. You get to be the hero of it. The path to self-respect isn't about loud fights. It's about the quiet, consistent choices you make every single day to honor your own truth. What's one boundary you're proud of setting in your life? Share it in the comments to inspire someone else who might need to hear it today. Thanks for watching.